Hi everyone, I'm Jo from Country Cow Designs, and in this video I wanted to show you a bit about how to use my patterns, how to cut out fabrics, interfacing, stabilisers, that sort of thing. I've been asked quite a few times to do a video like this, and a lot of this is just going to be my personal preference, so it's not necessarily the right way to do it, but I just wanted to show you a few different materials for the basics of bag making, and then hopefully you can find out what you prefer. So the biggest thing to start with is going to be interfacing. Now I've got a few different types here. This is woven interfacing. So if you have a look at it, you can see that it's got a weave, and it's a lot like your standard fabrics, your standard cotton in that way, except that it's got you can feel the glue on one side. So this is the most common interfacing, especially in my patterns. I use it on almost all of my cotton or light canvas fabrics. That's because it adds stability to the fabric, it adds strength, it makes it more resistant to wear, and it also even stops the edges from fraying. So that's commonly known as Vilene G700 if you're in the UK or Europe. Shapeflex SF101 I think is the most common in America. Then they also have Wovenfuse and Wovenfuse 2, which are similar, but I think maybe they're a little bit thicker. But yeah, this is probably the most staple requirement. The difference between that and non-woven, besides the price, because non-woven is way cheaper. Non-woven, you can probably hear it, it's a bit sort of papery. It doesn't have that weave. This is way cheaper, and you can get it off eBay. I think maybe £1.50 a metre or something like that in Britain, so it's definitely a lot cheaper. But I don't use this on the exterior of my bags because it gives the fabric kind of like a papery feel, and it shows the creases a lot more than the woven. So I really don't like to use that. I use it for zip facings because it gives it a nice crisp finish. And I also use it for things like cardstocks. I use the lighter version. So both of these are medium weight, they're the most common that you'd use. Then I'll show you the difference it makes on a fabric. So this is just a standard quilting cotton. And this is a woven interfacing. Unfortunately this is black because it was all that they had in stock at the time. But it's exactly the same as SF101 G700. It is a G700, it's just black in colour. So you can see there where I've fused it onto the fabric. This fabric doesn't have it on, and this does. And it gives it extra weight, extra strength, a bit more resistant, whereas you can see sort of how floppy it is on the section without it. So there you go. That's your most common. I also just wanted to show you cork, because I know this is getting really popular, and this is probably my favourite material to use. I know a lot of people use vinyl in bags. I don't use vinyl, mostly because I use a domestic sewing machine, and it's just tougher on the machine. So cork is a lot like fabric, really. It's like a thicker version of your standard fabric, so you don't need to interface cork. That's a great thing about it because it saves you a load of time, and it saves you money because you don't have to pay for the interfacing. But cork itself is quite expensive. I think you're looking about £40 a metre, so I don't tend to use it for the whole bag. I love using it for the base, straps, anywhere that's going to get a lot of wear really, because it seems to stand up quite well to the rain and it just wears really nicely. So that's cork. It would normally have a backing on it like this. You can leave the edges raw. I know a lot of people, if they're going to leave the edges raw, I never do, but if they are going to, they use a lighter on the edge. So you might be able to see that you get a little bit of a fluffy edge sometimes. And if you use a lighter on it, it will stop it from fluffing up, for lack of a better word. So there you go, that's Cork. So on Cork, I don't use, I wouldn't use SF101 or anything like that. I don't use any fusible interfacing, but I would still use my stabilisers. So now we're going to look at stabilisers. Now I'll admit that it seems like the words interfacing and stabiliser get interchanged a lot. For me, interfacing is things like woven interfacing and non-woven, and stabilisers is what gives the bag stability. So I don't know if that's the correct terms, but that's what I would refer to them as. So this is medium weight fleece. I think Vilene, it's called H640. I think in America you have Thermaline or something like that. But it's just your medium weight, medium loft fleece. So that's pretty common. Then you've got foam. There's loads of different brands of foam. This one is Deckerville, which is a sew-in foam. So this would be equivalent to Annie's Soft and Stable in America, or Bosal, I'm not really sure. But Bosal comes in a fusible option. Fusible is great because it means you don't have to just baste it in. So you can just fuse it straight to your fabric and you can keep it out of the seam allowances. So if you want a domestic machine, that's great. The only problem is that sometimes fusible can show wrinkles after you've birthed the bag, and then whenever you're using the bag, it can sort of show wrinkles where it's fused. So I still stick to sewing. I always baste mine in, and then after I've constructed the bag, I just trim it out with the seams so that the seams are nice and neat. So that's our fleece, that's our foam, and I will just show you Deckerville as well. Okay, and this is Deckerville Light. This is made, I think, by Vilene, so it sounds like it's pretty expensive to get hold of in America and Canada and places like that, but in Europe it's pretty cheap. This gives your fabric more of a leather-like feel, so it gives it a bit of extra stability, not as much as foam, possibly more than fleece. But I love to use this in things like flaps, where I want it to be a little bit more stable, but I don't want the thickness. So an example of that would be the flap on this backpack. So it's kept it nice and thin, but it just makes it a little bit stronger, a little bit more stable. I also prefer to use Deckerville in my gussets. Gives it a nice little bit of stability, but again, without the thickness. So that's generally the kind of places I use my Deckerville Light. You can also get Deckerville Heavy, which some people use for bases. I prefer to use Peltex 71F, 70F or S520. They're all basically like really, really thin cardboard, great for bases. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you these different stabilisers in bags so you can get an idea. So this is my Untitled pattern. This has got foam in it. So it's nice and stable, nice and sturdy. Very similar to the backpack, which has foam in the front, back and bottom, and then Deckerville on top. So you can see they're quite stable, quite sturdy. This bag here has got fleece in it. So this is my Wanderlust Tote. It's supposed to be slouchy, and the fleece is better at giving sort of a flat, slouchy effect. So hopefully you can get an idea of that, but it is just a lot slouchier than the foam. This Wanderlust Tote has Deckerville Light in it because I just wanted to try it out. And generally I think that's the best way to get to know your interfacings. Just try stuff out, see what you like. I don't like the way this works with Deckerville Light. It makes it sort of sturdy and it feels really thick, but it's still slouchy and it makes it feel a lot heavier. So I'm not a fan of that, but everybody has different opinions. So this last one, this just has G700 or SF101. So it just has the medium woven interfacing, no fleece, no stabiliser, and you can see it's quite slouchy, but it's just still just about stand up. It's quite thin. This is great if you're going for a slouchy bag, I think, and it saves to not have to put a stabiliser in it. But you can definitely see the difference when compared with the foam. So if you're using a lot of interfacing or stabilisers, you may find that it's simpler and cheaper to buy a bolt. Now a bolt, I don't know why it's called a bolt, it's basically a roll. So this is a bolt of foam of Styleville. It's way cheaper to buy a bolt in the UK, as at least. I get mine from S.E. Simmons in Bristol, but you can order online. So you just buy the entire bolt, cut off what you need. It means there's less waste as well, because you're, you know, if you buy a metre and then you use 0.8 of a metre, you've just got a tiny bit that you don't need. Whereas with this, you're cutting off what you need. So these are really handy if you have somewhere to store them. The other thing that you might notice from my other videos that I absolutely love is my hump jumper. So this was, I think, £5 from Amazon quite a while ago. This is fantastic. When you're sewing over humps or bulky seams, things like that, you simply put it under the back of your presser foot to raise up the foot, and it means that you miss the skipped stitches. Now you can just use a piece of folded up cardboard or something like that, but because this has these sections cut out, it means that you can get your needle through. It's just really practical, really handy. Sometimes they're called bulky seam aids. For me, this has just made a big difference. Maybe it's just personal preference, but I feel like this makes top stitching way simpler for me. So I just wanted to give you a little introduction to my patterns to start with. So all of my patterns, they have a separate file for the instructions and a separate file for the printed pieces. Now the printed pieces are like this, you know, that you're physically going to cut out. The instructions file, I'm hoping that you're going to follow along on your phone or your tablet or your laptop, so as to save paper and printing. But you know, a lot of people do still print it, that's fine. Just bear in mind that they're in two separate files. So if you can't find the instructions, it's because you need to go back to your download email and download both. Now in the instructions file, you will find a few different things. First of all, I always try and have a photo of the bag with all of the different parts labelled, so that when it says exterior bottom panel, you know what that is, and that will help you choose your fabrics. The next thing I have is this cutting chart, so cutting and interfacing on all of my patterns, and this will detail all of the pieces that you need to cut out, how many of them, the measurement, depending. This one has a large, a tall and a small size. This is the Toulouse, and it tells you whether to put woven interfacing in, and then you tick once you've cut everything out. So it just helps you stay nice and organised. There's also labels that you can just cut out and pin to each of your pieces, so that you don't lose them, and you know what you're looking for. So cutting out the paper pieces. When they need joining, you'll notice that it tells you what piece to join it to. I've also put little symbols, stars, hearts, that sort of thing, to help you match it up. And you need to match up the arrows and the symbols, but don't overlap them, just match them up like this. You'll know that your pattern piece is correct because it has the measurements there, and you can simply measure your finished pattern piece at the widest point, and you'll know if it's the right size. Now, a lot of my patterns have options on. I love to give options. So for instance, the Toulouse, this is the free pattern for my Facebook group, so you can just join and download it for free. It has a tall option and a small option. This dashed line has a little note saying that for the small option, you need to cut on this line. So you just simply fold that. Like so, and you would cut like that, your fabrics out for the small version, or you would cut that out for the tall version. it also tells you what fabrics and woven interfacing and things like that. So I try to put the information everywhere, just so you know, whatever you're using at the time, whether it's the chart or the pattern piece, you can find what you're looking for. Now, lots of pattern pieces will say cut and fold. If you've never cut out a pattern like this before, it's going to seem a bit odd. Cut on fold, what that means is that you need to get your fabric out, and you need to fold it. Start from this side. So you're just going to fold it like this. And where it says cut on fold, you're going to put that onto the fold and cut it out. So when you cut that out, it's going to be twice the size. So a lot of people prefer to just cut it out from the measurements, or perhaps draw around this, flip it over, draw around it again, cut the whole thing out. I've got here piece A from the printed pattern. This says on here, lining fabric and exterior fabric, you're doing one of each with woven interfacing if you're using cotton or canvas. So if you're using cork, vinyl, leather, don't bother putting any woven interfacing in. If you're using cotton or canvas, lightweight canvas, you need to put something in. The only exception there would be waterproof canvas. I wouldn't bother interfacing that. So what you can do is you can cut out every pattern piece in the fabric that you're using, and then you cut out every piece in the interfacing, and then you glue the interfacing to each piece. For me, that's just too much faff. So, as you can probably tell from earlier, I have a preferred method of doing this, and I believe it's called block fusing, but again, there's so many interchangeable phrases, I'm not 100% sure if this is what block fusing really means, but this is my idea of it. So what I've done is I've laid out the fabric I'm using for my next bag. So this one's telling me I need 2 of my lining fabric. So say this was my lining fabric, I'd find all my pattern pieces that need lining fabric. I would lay them up probably on the back of the fabric, but I've got black interfacing, so you're not going to be able to see it. And I just grab a fabric pen and just do a really rough line around the outside. And what I do is I just lay all of my pattern pieces out like that. I work out how much fabric I need, and then I interface the whole lot in one go, as you can see there. So I've just interfaced up to here because I didn't need this much. Then what I'm going to do is, now that it's interfaced, I'm going to cut each piece out. So I only have to cut once. For me, this is just so much easier. It also means that if my fabric is going to shrink at all, which sometimes it does when you fuse your interfacing, then the shrinking is out of the way before I cut, which means when I cut, it's going to be exactly the right size. I'm not going to have any problems. So these fabric pens, these are called Friction. Got these off Amazon. These are great. You just draw on your fabric and the iron will remove it for you, just a bit of heat. Don't draw necessarily on the front of your fabric where it's going to be seen. So if I was cutting this out, I wouldn't draw anything right here on this flap, because I have heard experiences where people have said it's gotten really cold and the pen has reappeared. So I don't use it for that, but to cut out my fabrics, it's perfect because this is all going to be in the seam allowance. Okay, one other thing I wanted to cover is zips. You use a lot of zips when you're making bags. The 2 most common sizes, you've got number 5 and you've got number 3. So generally number 5 is used for outside and number 3 is used for the linings. What I like to do is to buy my zips like this. It's just continuous zip tape, and then you buy the zip heads and you put them on yourself. So that's pretty simple to do. I think the difference is if you're using cheap zip tape, this can be a bit of a nightmare, but if you've got good quality, it's really easy to get the heads on. So you get your zip head, want the rounded section, and you need to put the sides in, feed them in there, just a little bit, not all the way. Oops, I've gone too far. Right. There you go. So both need to be equal. Put that down and just pull your head on. This is great as well if you want to do a two-way zip, like on the backpack. You just put one head on one end, one head on the other, and they open and close together. This is probably the best way to do zips without sort of having a lot of waste, because you use exactly how much you need. Whereas if you have a load of 20-inch zips and you only need a 7-inch, you're going to have some waste. So the other thing to remember with zips is that the ends will fray. Not sure if you can see that. So you've got two options for stopping that. You could use some fray check. This is one I'm using. But if you look on eBay for fray check, you can find it quite easily. So you could put some of that on the end. Alternatively, and what I find easier, is a lighter. And now you can see that the frayed ends are gone and it's sort of melted and sealed the edge. So that will prevent it from fraying in the future. So I think that's everything. Maybe I would also just show you fabric glue. That's what I like to use for keeping my zips in place when I'm stitching them in place, but you'll see that in my videos. Wonder clips, I like to use Wonder clips to hold everything together. I much prefer these to pins. I think for bag making it's just a lot simpler. But otherwise I think that's everything. If you've got any questions, just pop them in the comments and let me know what you think. You can get my free Toulouse pattern from my Facebook group if you want to just check out how my patterns work and what they're like. And the other patterns are all available from my PayHip shop, so I'll put the link in the comments.